Picture this. A man spends 40 years building something from nothing. He pours every ounce of sweat, sacrifice, and sleepless night into a fortune that most people only dream about. And then, in his final act on this earth, he takes everything he built and hands it to a complete stranger he met maybe once or twice in passing. Not a charity, not a cause he believed in. A random person who happened to cross his path at the right moment. His children get nothing. His grandchildren get nothing. The family name, the legacy, the empire he constructed brick by brick, all of it, handed to an outsider. And here is the most disturbing part of this entire story. He planned it that way. Every single detail was intentional. Stay with me because what we are about to unpack is one of the most psychologically complex inheritance decisions ever documented. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, and what it reveals about the terrifying intersection of wealth, resentment, family wounds that never healed, and one man's final desperate attempt to make his family understand something they refused to see while he was still alive. So let us start at the beginning. The patriarch in question was not born wealthy. He was the first generation, the one who clawed his way up from genuine hardship. And that matters because everything about his psychology, his relationship with money, his relationship with his children, and ultimately his final decision, all of it traces back to that origin point. When you build wealth from zero, you develop a very particular set of beliefs about what money means and what it demands from the people who receive it. You believe it should be earned. You believe it should be respected. You believe the people who inherit it should feel the weight of what it took to create it. His children did not feel that weight, at least not in any way he could recognize. Now here is where it gets complicated because if you ask his kids, they will tell you a completely different story. They will tell you about a father who was emotionally unavailable, who measured love in balance sheets, who showed up to their lives like an investor reviewing a portfolio rather than a parent nurturing human beings. They will tell you about birthdays missed, about achievements dismissed, about the constant unspoken message that nothing they did was ever quite enough. And honestly, both versions of this story are probably true simultaneously. That is the brutal reality of family dysfunction at the wealthy end of the spectrum. But the father did not see it that way. From his perspective, he had given them everything. Private schools, opportunities, connections, comfort, a foundation that he himself never had. And what did they do with it? He watched his oldest son make business decision after business decision that he considered reckless and disrespectful of the resources provided. He watched his daughter walk away from the family enterprise entirely to pursue something he privately viewed as frivolous. He watched resentment and entitlement calcify into something permanent in each of them. He watched and he waited and he grew colder. The stranger enters the story in a way that almost feels scripted, except it was not. By most accounts, this was simply someone who showed genuine interest in the man himself, not his money, not his connections, not what they stood to gain. Someone who asked him questions about his journey, who listened without an agenda, who treated him like a person rather than a resource. For a man who had spent decades surrounded by people who wanted something from him, including his own family, this was intoxicating. It cracked something open in him that had been sealed shut for years. Now I want to be careful here because I am not suggesting this outsider was innocent of all manipulation. The psychology of late-life influence is a serious field of study, and we genuinely cannot know what was calculated versus what was organic. What we do know is that the father began changing his estate plan during this period, quietly, methodically, with legal precision that made it extremely difficult to challenge afterward. And this is where the real devastation begins for the family. When the will was finally read, the silence in that room must have been suffocating. Everything, and I mean the majority of a genuinely massive estate, directed to this person they barely knew. The children received token amounts, almost insulting in their smallness relative to what they expected, structured in a way that felt deliberately humiliating. Because it was. He left documentation explaining his reasoning, and this is the part that cuts deepest. He did not say he had fallen out of love with them. He did not say he wanted to punish them. He said he wanted them to experience what he had experienced, which was the need to build something rather than simply receive it. He said the greatest gift he could give them was the removal of the safety net. If you think that logic makes a certain cold kind of sense, you are not wrong. There is an entire philosophy of inheritance built around the idea that massive generational wealth actually destroys the people who receive it unprepared. Plenty of serious thinkers and successful builders have made this argument in good faith. But here is what his logic missed entirely, and this is the psychological core of why this story haunts people so deeply. He was not actually trying to help his children. He was punishing them while telling himself and everyone else that he was teaching them. The distinction is everything. Genuine concern for their development would have involved conversations, conditions, challenges set up in advance, involvement in the process. What he did instead was make a unilateral decision in secret that expressed contempt dressed up in the language of wisdom. The legal battles that followed were predictably brutal. Challenges to the will on the grounds of undue influence, on questions about his mental capacity toward the end, on procedural claims about how the documents were executed. Courts in these situations face an agonizing standard because a person's right to dispose of their own assets according to their own wishes is a foundational legal principle. Proving that someone was manipulated or mentally incapacitated requires a very high evidentiary bar, and his family struggled to clear it. The estate largely held. What the family was left with was something that money cannot resolve, which is the knowledge that their father chose a stranger, that in his final accounting of his life and his relationships, they did not make the cut. You can intellectualize that as his failure rather than theirs. You can process it in therapy for decades, which several of them did, but the wound does not fully close because it was designed not to. Let us talk about what this does to a family system over time, because the ripple effects extend far beyond the immediate loss of the inheritance. Siblings who might have had complicated but functional relationships become adversarial because grief needs somewhere to go and other people are easier targets than a dead father. Family identity collapses when the shared narrative of what your family stands for gets shattered by the person who was supposed to be its foundation. Children of the disinherited grow up hearing a story about their grandparent that shapes how they understand trust, loyalty, and what family actually means. And the outsider who received everything. That story rarely ends cleanly either. Sudden massive wealth reshapes people in ways they do not anticipate. Relationships they had before the inheritance become complicated. New relationships become impossible to trust. The weight of having received something that destroyed a family is not nothing, even if you tell yourself you had no control over it. Here is what I want you to take away from all of this. The story we tell ourselves about our relationships, about who deserves what, about what we owe the people we brought into the world or who brought us into it, those stories have consequences that outlast us. A man thought he was making a statement. He thought his final act would communicate something his living voice never could. What he actually did was confirm every fear his children had ever had about where they stood with him, and he did it in the most permanent way imaginable. Wealth can be rebuilt, businesses can be restarted, but the specific damage of being explicitly passed over by your own parent, calculated and documented and legally enforced, that reshapes something foundational in a person's understanding of themselves and the world. If there is a lesson buried in all of this wreckage, it is probably simpler than all the legal strategy and psychological analysis suggests. The conversations that feel too hard to have while everyone is still alive become the only conversations that matter once someone is gone. Whatever this father needed to say to his children, whatever he needed to hear from them, the time for that was not in a lawyer's office. It was around a table, in a room together, while there was still a chance for something to change. He missed that window. Deliberately or not, he missed it. And a family is still paying for it.